What do you remember when Pearl Harbor happened, like the day Pearl Harbor happened?
Well, I remember, number one, that I didn't know where Pearl Harbor was, and I was home because I remember talking to my father as soon as it occurred. It was all over the radios. The radios were talking about Pearl Harbor and the attack and the terrible Japanese and blah, blah, blah. And and I was definitely home. And I asked Dad, what I needed to do. And he said, well, you need to keep going to school.
The damage at Pearl Harbor was 21 ships sunk, 188 planes destroyed, 159 damaged, 2,403 people died, 1,178 people wounded. An important fact about Pearl Harbor was that there were no aircraft carriers in dock that day. Pearl Harbor was a turning point in history. The attack on Pearl Harbor hurried up the U.S. entry into World War II. That expanded the war from not only a European and Asian war to also a North American war. With the U.S. in the war, the Allies were able to defeat Hitler. It was also the end of the Great Depression because of all the war jobs being created. What were the economic effects of Pearl Harbor?
We were just still in a depression, really, when the war came along. The war is what brought us out of the depression. Because all of a sudden, there were all these jobs. Everybody had jobs. I graduated from high school and I had a choice of jobs and what I could do. And shipyards were opening and everything was geared toward the war effort. And so economically, it was looking up.
Why didn't you finish college?
Well, what happened? Well, I had two cousins, which were both already in the military. Both of them were pilots. One of them had gone to Canada and had become a pilot in Canada. My other cousin, Al Freeze, had also gone into the aviation cadet program in the United States. And so they sort of talked about aviation and flying and what have you. And I thought, that maybe that's the way I would like to get involved. Well, my dad said, you really want to continue your education because you'll be more important. But there was a sort of a tug of war there that Colonel Collins, who was head of the ROTC at Georgia Tech, encouraged me to stay in school. But I told him, if I stay in school, eventually I think all of us are going to be mobilized. And I don't want to be mobilized with everybody because then the opportunities are less. The seniors at Georgia Tech will be ahead of me, and rather than, I'm just a freshman.
You have less choice of what you want to be.
And the last choice of what you want to be, so.
Yeah.
So I decided, well, maybe I want to, move as soon as the handwriting is on the wall. And so I did. I did take the aviation cadet examination. And when I qualified, and I could go directly into the aviation cadet program to learn how to fly airplanes and stuff, I decided to drop out of Georgia Tech then and to go full-time into the military.
As usual.
What do you remember about rationing?
Oh, I remember the things that I liked were rationed, like sugar and shoes. And I remember, but in particular, we couldn't get nylon hose. And occasionally the stores would get in a shipment and you'd see a long line of women And you knew what it was, so you would get in that line because you didn't want to miss out on being allowed to buy 2 pairs of nylons. We guarded them very carefully. And you know, they were kind of fragile.
There was very little travel in those days because traveling was not very convenient. Most people traveled by bus or car. A few people traveled in aircraft, but not very many. And now, anytime you go a long distance, you end up going to the airport. But not in those days. In those days, we didn't have commercial airliners like we have now. And so there was very little travel. Once we had the war, people traveled. Just about everybody traveled. They not only traveled throughout the United States, but they ended up traveling to Europe or traveling to the Pacific, wherever the war was going on. And so consequently, as I say, that most people became aware of other places in the world instead of just South Dakota, and most people in the United States. And so there was a total change in just about the entire population. As everybody started thinking, in other words, where was Japan in relation to, and people started looking at globes every now and then, and looking at maps every now and then.
Pearl Harbor also caused the creation of what Dwight Eisenhower called the military-industrial complex. The military-industrial complex included many new agencies, such as the NSA, the Air Force, the CIA, and the Department of Defenses. Before the war, the U.S. had less than 200 bases in different countries. Today, the U.S. has more than 900 bases in 130 different countries. Pearl Harbor changed the course of history. Before the war, Pearl Harbor was unknown. Now, Hawaii is a state and a major tourist attraction, even though they don't allow you in the most convenient parking spaces. Also, Pearl Harbor caused the world to get smaller because of improvement in commercial aviation. The U.S. got more powerful economically, politically, and in its military presence around the world.
This motion picture has been rated G for general audiences.